Mr. Nordstrom.
Absolutely.
Well, since we're going to Mr. Lankford next, I hope you continue to feel that way. Mr. Lankford.
Mr. Nordstrom, I just need to follow up on a conversation we had earlier dealing with the cable that you said March the 28th, 2012. You had mentioned that you drafted that cable requesting additional personnel for both the embassy in Tripoli and in Benghazi because you were very much short. And as time was expiring and the SST team were leaving, you knew you were not going to have enough people. You mentioned you drafted the cable. Your intention was and your assumption was the executive leadership, including the Undersecretary all the way to the Secretary, would see that cable or at least be briefed on that cable and the request for that security. There's been a lot of discussion about the official response that came back on April the 19th. Who do you think saw or the intention or at least reflected the opinion of when that cable came back to you? When that cable response came back to you, who was the assumption that was actually responding to you?
Normally, someone would tell me exactly who it is, or they would indicate who the point of contact was. If I recall correctly, that's still unknown to me. I assume that it's coming from DS, but as I testified to before, so many of these decisions seem to be at Ambassador Kennedy's level or higher. Clearly, that was cleared by some of those other officials.
All right, so you're assuming this is the Undersecretary or on up somewhere that had personal knowledge of that.
Certainly saw it ahead of time.
Of that cable that came back. It is an established fact that there is video of the attack. There are clear video of the attackers the night. The FBI has done an extensive investigation. We're now months past that time. Are any of you aware of anyone who has been held to account for the murders that happened in Libya? Anyone detained? Anyone arrested? Anyone captured? Are you aware of anything that has happened to any of the attackers to hold them to account?
Neither the perpetrators nor the persons that made decisions. Again, the 4 people that were named in the ARB were put on administrative leave. I understand one of them is trying to come back off of that leave and go to be the RSO in NATO, which is shocking to me.
So at this point, no one is aware of anyone who's been held to account in any way for the murder of 4 Americans?
Not that I'm aware of.
In 1998, we've discussed frequently, there was the bombing of the embassy in Kenya and Tanzania. There was an ARB at the end of that as well. And let me just read you the 3 findings at the end of that ARB that was done in 1999. It said this. Number 1, State Department of Washington did not assess the threats or take notes of the clear warning signs and escalating threats. Number 2, it noted the facility was inadequate for even the most modest of attack. And number 3, there was a lack of preparations or warning systems at the facility. That could have been written a month ago. We have discussed often on this. The one thing we have to do is learn the lesson. In 1998, the same thing occurred, and we have not learned the lesson. What we know of today and the realities that have come out and through all that you have contributed to this conversation and what you have contributed is invaluable, is that we did not do the most basic minimum security that was required by the State Department standards set after the bombings in Nairobi, Kenya, and in Tanzania. We did not do the basics. We did not provide the level of security. There were, in fact, cameras that were in the box still in Benghazi because the technical person had never been sent to actually install those, and so there could have been additional warning signs, but they had not actually been installed and done. We know that the Tripoli facility was even at a greater risk than Benghazi. There were even more vulnerabilities in Tripoli than there were at Benghazi's, both in physical security around the facility and in actual staffing of people that are the gun toters, as you mentioned before, the door kickers and such, people that would actually be there to be able to provide that security. The minimum level was not provided. In fact, my understanding, Mr. Hicks, is that it reached such a point of vulnerability that you actually approached some of the diplomatic security and asked for the diplomats to be trained in how to handle a gun because there was such a fear of the people on the ground because you were so exposed. Is that true?
That's true.
We have got to learn the lessons of the past. This happened in 1998. We allowed it to happen again. The State Department has to put into practice their own standards and put into place the things we know to be right. We cannot allow a place that's listed as critical and high risk to our personnel to be ignored and to not have the support they need. If there's any one gain that we can do in any one way to be able to honor those that have fallen is that we actually do learn the lesson and we protect our diplomats with what is required. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. We now go to the gentleman from Florida.